Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters. Welcome back to the Be Quran podcast, where we journey through the Quran, reflect on its wisdom, and explore the beliefs that shape our lives. I'm your host, Ali.
And I'm Fatima. Today's episode is all about understanding the foundation of our faith, the Islamic belief system, also known as Aqaid. Why is it so important? And how does belief go beyond knowledge?
We'll talk about what makes belief the bedrock of a Muslim's life, the difference between knowing and truly believing, and why Aqidah is the first thing we'll be asked about in the hereafter.
It's a powerful topic, and one that connects directly to how we live, pray, and understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Let's begin. Bismillah.
Today, we're getting into something really fundamental. The Islamic belief system, what's known as Aqaid. We've got some source material you shared that makes a pretty bold claim that these beliefs are, well, the most important thing in life. So our mission today is to unpack that. Take this material, see what the core ideas are, why it's considered so foundational. What does being a Muslim truly mean from this perspective? Why start with belief?
Yeah, and what's really striking from the get-go is how these sources connect Aqaid, understanding these beliefs, directly to the purpose of life itself. And not just academically, but to your personal journey, your actions, even your accountability. It's less about just definitions and more about, well, the bedrock of faith and practice.
Okay, so let's tackle that main assertion head on. The belief system is the most important dimension. Why? What's the reasoning in the sources?
Well, the core argument links it directly to the stated purpose of creation, which, according to this view, is to worship God. And worship, crucially, doesn't just begin with, say, prayer. It begins with something called marifa.
Marifa.
Meaning?
Knowing God. Believing in Him. Understanding and accepting what He wants us to believe. So if your purpose is worship, and step one of worship is knowing and believing...
Then belief has to come first, logically. Yeah.
Exactly. It becomes a prerequisite.
That hierarchy makes a lot of sense. And the source material gives that story, doesn't it? About Prophet Muhammad sending what to Yemen.
Right. That's a perfect illustration. He's sending someone to teach a whole community. And the first thing he tells him to invite them to, it isn't prayer, it isn't charity, it's invite them to the belief in the one God. Only after they grasp and accept that core belief. Then he says, okay, now teach them about prayer, about zakat, and so on.
So it's really belief first, action second, the absolute entry point.
Precisely. It frames righteous actions as flowing from that belief. You can't really have the latter without the former in this view. And the sources take this even further, connecting it to, well, what happens after life? Accountability.
Oh, right. The questioning in the grave. What's the first thing asked, according to this material? Not your deeds initially. It's your qued. Who is your Lord? What's your book? What's your faith? Who's your prophet? Your actions, the sources suggest, are assessed in light of that foundational belief system.
Wow. That really hammers home the priority. If that's the first hurdle, so to speak, it must be the first focus now.
That's the implication. And you see this echoed in Scripture too, right? The sources point out how the Qur'an often pairs belief and action. You read, those who believe and do good deeds. Again and again. Belief is consistently put first. It's the foundation.
The necessary bedrock. Got it. Now, something else the material addresses is a common point, maybe misunderstanding. About the words Islam and Muslim, people often link them straight to peace.
Yeah, that comes up a lot. And look, Islam is absolutely intended as a peaceful religion. There's that hadith cited saying a true Muslim is someone others are safe from, their tongue and actions. That's vital. But linguistically, the definition of the word Islam itself, according to these sources, doesn't derive from salam or peace.
Okay, so where does it come from then?
It comes from a root that means to submit. Aslama.
Submit.
Yes, submission to God. Accepting His commands, His will, embracing the religion He revealed. So a Muslim is someone who has recognized God's religion and consciously accepts it, submits themselves to it. That's the core meaning presented.
Okay, that distinction, submitting to something, brings up another really interesting point from the sources. The difference between just knowing something, having knowledge, and actually believing it, are they the same?
They're definitely presented as different. Knowledge is, having the facts, information, understanding something intellectually.
And the example used is pretty powerful. Pharaoh.
Exactly. Pharaoh and his people, when Prophet Musa came with the signs, the sources state quite clearly that their souls knew it was the truth. They had certainty inwardly. They possessed the knowledge.
That they rejected it.
They rejected it out of arrogance, pride, whatever the reason. They knew, but they didn't submit. They didn't believe in the sense Islam requires.
That really clarifies it. Knowledge alone isn't the goal.
Right. The sources argue Islam wants you to go beyond just having the facts. Acquire the pure knowledge, yes, but then take the crucial step of submitting to it, accepting it in your heart.
And that heart acceptance, that's belief.
That's what the sources identify as iman, or belief. Knowledge is the prerequisite, but belief is that active submission and acceptance within the heart.
So let's go back to the term aqaid itself. We've established its importance, but why that word? The source material digs into the Arabic root, which is quite revealing.
It is. Aqaid is plural. The singular is aqaida, and it comes from the root aqwada, or the noun uqda, which literally means, well, to tie a knot or to bind. And uqda is a knot.
A knot. Okay, so what does tying a knot have to do with a belief system? That seems metaphorical.
It's a powerful analogy used in the sources. The idea is when you gain that knowledge and your heart accepts it, submits to it, it's like you're taking your heart and literally tying it firmly to that belief.
Tying your heart to the belief.
Exactly. Think about a physical knot. It's meant to be strong, secure, tight, difficult to undo, right?
Uh-huh.
So the analogy is that beliefs, your aqaid, shouldn't be like loose ideas or facts that can just drift away. They should be like firm knots, securely fastened in your heart, deeply held, unwavering.
That's a very strong image. Not just intellectual assent, but a real binding.
That's the concept. These are the firm convictions, the knots of belief formed through knowledge and submission.
And the sources also mentioned different levels of this submission. It's not all or nothing.
Right. There's sort of a baseline level, maybe accepting the core tenets intellectually. Saying the Shahada, acknowledging God as one, Muhammad is his messenger. That's the entry point. But then the material points to much deeper levels. It uses examples like Prophet Ibrahim and his son Ismail.
Their story, yeah.
Their willingness to follow God's command, however difficult, is shown as an example of profound, deep submission, complete trust and acceptance. And the source mentions Ibrahim telling his sons, essentially, do not die except in a state of Islam, meaning full submission. That points to a lifelong deepening commitment.
So it's a spectrum, potentially a journey of deepening that submission. Another point the sources bring up is about the timeline, saying the religion of God, right from Adam, is called Islam.
Yes, the reasoning given is that the fundamental requirement from God for humanity across all ages has been submission to him, to his laws and guidance.
Okay, but then what about Judaism, Christianity? How do they fit into that from this perspective?
The sources make a distinction here. They explain that the specific Sharia, the detailed laws, rituals, a code of conduct that did change with different prophets for different communities and times. So the Sharia revealed to Musa formed the basis of what became Judaism. The Sharia revealed to Isa, Christianity. However, the underlying message, that core path of submitting one's will to the one God, that, the sources argue, is the timeless essence common to all true prophets. And that core essence is what they term Islam.
So the specific rules might evolve for different contexts, but the fundamental act of submission to God is the Islam running through it all.
That's the perspective presented in this material, yes.
Okay, so let's try and sort of recap the main threads here from this deep dive. The sources we looked at make a really strong case that your belief system, your Aqaid, isn't just important, it's the most important thing. It's positioned as the absolute foundation for worship, for any meaningful action. It's the first thing you're accountable for. And even the word Islam itself points back to this idea of submission.
A submission described with that powerful knot analogy, binding your heart firmly to these truths.
Right.
And because it holds this primary position, the sources stress that it's really on you, the individual, to actively seek out, understand, and solidify these beliefs. It's presented as a core personal responsibility. It's not passive information. It's something to wrestle with, internalize, and truly make your own.
It makes you think, why is that distinction between just knowing something intellectually and truly actively believing and submitting so critical in this view? And how does that idea of knotting your heart resonate personally? So yeah, this deep dive really highlights a perspective where belief isn't a footnote, it's the headline. It's the starting block, the bedrock for everything else. And that difference between just knowing facts and having a conviction tied firmly like a knot, that seems absolutely central.
It definitely prompts reflection, doesn't it? Thinking about our own beliefs, are they just things we've heard, facts we acknowledge, or are they convictions we've actively tied our hearts to, like those knots?
So here's a final thought to leave you with, drawing from this material. If the sources are right, and the most critical aspect of this life, and the very first thing examined after it, is your belief system, What does that practically mean for how you prioritize your time and effort now in understanding and firming up those beliefs? What might it look like to move beyond just knowing about things towards that deeper state of submission and belief the sources describe? Definitely something worth pondering. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you continue your own exploration.